Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Tuesday, January 16th. This is day 102 since October 7th. I'm currently in Jordan, Amman, Jordan, and was supposed to be headed to a few other places in the Middle East. But overnight, news reported that Iran bombed Erbil. Iran launched missile strikes in both Iraq and Syria. They cited that they were attacking terrorists who had attacked Iran. They launched a missile strike against what they called anti-Iranian terrorist groups in both northern Iraq and Erbil. They set off large explosions and sirens, including at the American consulate around midnight last night. The strike in the city of Erbil killed 4 civilians, according to the Kurdistan Regional Security Council. Air traffic was diverted briefly, officials said. A separate ballistic missile attack targeted or hit targets in Syria. A statement by the Revolutionary Guard Corps said that the missile strike in Erbil had been aimed at, quote, the destruction of espionage headquarters and places that anti-Iranian terrorist groups used to plan a suicide bombing attack in Iran that had killed 86 people this month at the memorial procession of Major General Qasem Soleimani. You may recall we talked about that in one of the daily updates. It's important to note that while the consulate was one of the places struck, my understanding is that there were no injuries from the U.S., no U.S. injuries, and at least according to Iran, the U.S. was not targeted, but that's all that's currently being reported. You know, one of the main things we're hearing throughout the conversations that we're having in Israel, in the occupied Palestinian territories, in Jordan, is that the main goal is to prevent regional warfare, that what's happening between Israel and Hamas, that the horrific bombing in Gaza, the goal is for it not to expand, beyond Israel and Palestine. And yet the other thing that has become increasingly obvious being here is that it's already happened, that Israel's engagement toward Gaza, and particularly the devastating effect on civilians, that Arabs around the Middle East see this as an affront on their cousins or their brothers and sisters. We've spent so much time talking to church leaders and civilians and even politicians and others here in Jordan. And the idea that this is already not a regional war is just not being discussed here in the Arab world. The fronts to pay attention to are certainly Gaza, and we will talk more about that. The West Bank, the big concern is that if things explode in the West Bank, then there will be an all-out regional war. Of course, the border between Lebanon and Israel, in North Israel, we've talked about the 100,000 who've been evacuated out of their homes in North Israel. Hezbollah has said they don't want a war, but they are calling for an end to the bombing of Gaza. Pro-Iranian groups in Syria and Iraq, and anti-Iranian groups. So the U.S. just in the last few days has attacked Houthis in Yemen, which was greatly critiqued even by some Western powers. And the question was, did that violate the Congressional War Powers Act? Did Biden have the authority to do that? Now, the Houthis have been attacking the Red Sea. They've been saying they will attack vessels that are headed towards Israel. So all of this centers around what's happening in Gaza. And one of the things we will be talking to U.S. government officials about is that this idea that the Houthis is apart from Gaza is really kind of ignoring the bigger picture. We also have heard, this is according to Israeli news, Haaretz and others have reported that President Biden is quite frustrated with Netanyahu. Words in the news have included frustration, anger, disappointment, where Biden is not seeing Netanyahu as an ally. He sees Israel as an ally, but not the prime minister. Apparently in a phone call, I don't know when it was, but Biden brusquely entered the call and said this conversation is over. And his admission to supporters in a private event in Boston said that he knows of Netanyahu's antics and intentions. It's been 22 days since Biden and Netanyahu have spoken. And between October and December, the two leaders were speaking several times a week. Now, Biden's in a really tough spot. What does the U.S. do now? There are protests, all over Washington, D.C. last weekend calling for a ceasefire. You have strong divisions between groups that are very pro-Palestinian, and you have rising anti-Semitism. You have groups that are very, very pro-Israel and very anti-Muslim. You've got all these divisions happening. Alan Pincus, who's a correspondent, again for Haaretz, so there's 6 different tools that Biden could use, he says, in his arsenal to leverage Netanyahu. He says, 1, he can disengage and say to Israel, I did my best. Call me when you're serious. Apparently, this is what James Baker did in 1990. But according to Pincus, this ignores the regional dimension of U.S. involvement. 2, he could admonish Netanyahu publicly and blame him for failing to cooperate. But the argument is that would put Israel at risk. It would make them more vulnerable to their enemies. 3, he could slow down the transfer of arms and munitions to Israel. Many in the United States are saying not only is the U.S. arming the war on Gaza, not only is the U.S. complicit, it's participatory. We heard some reports on the ground. We have heard that there are 2,000 U.S. troops that are standing by. There's a question of, are there any Americans in Gaza? We've heard that there may be American military even training officials, Israeli military, on how to do urban warfare. I mean, we know about the relationship between the Israeli military and the U.S. military and the U.S. police and the Israeli military, but what role is the United States really playing? And as an American citizen, we're calling for an end to this war. We don't want to be complicit, let alone participatory. And so we have to say enough. I'm on number 4. Biden could abstain or even support a new UN Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire. Wouldn't that be the day? Would love to see that happen. 5, he could demand a ceasefire, something the U.S. has conspicuously refrained from doing until now. That's what we're calling him to do. A ceasefire, positive steps toward peace, give Palestinians hope that they can have liberation, an end to the blockade on Gaza, an end to the occupation, give them proximate steps towards peace. Someone here in Jordan, a very high-ranking official, said, if you give Palestinians a very clear step and vision towards freedom and liberation and an end to the occupation, they will be the first to get Hamas out. That's what we've been hearing. And so give them that vision and give Israelis a vision of what safety and security looks like, which they've not been able to achieve through militarization. So that is an option. 6, the most audacious option, in coordination with Saudi, Egypt, Jordan, the UAE, and Qatar, Biden could publish the U.S. vision for a post-war Gaza, including Israel's integration into the Axis, complete with normalization with Saudi Arabia, and present this to Israel over Netanyahu's head. Saying, I've been there for you. I care about your security. I'll guarantee your security, but I also care about your future. Here's what I propose, and I will back you through the process. Now, what really, really bothers me, and what we heard directly through Prime Minister Shataya of the Palestinian Authority, and what we've heard from Palestinian civil society, is when I just went through that list, where are the Palestinians? Everybody in the world is trying to determine their future. Gaza is being bombed to smithereens, and the Palestinians aren't even invited to the table to have self-determination and contribute, to determining their own fate. So I think one of the things that's also frustrating is the U.S., is looking for signs of escalation. And here in the Middle East, everyone's perspective is, guess who are the ones escalating? Not only Israel, but the U.S. So citing the Red Sea and economic effects of the Houthis, one of the reasons the US and the UK said that they had to intervene with the Houthi attacks on the Red Sea was that it was causing too much economic devastation. But from the perspective of those here, the US are the ones the Houthis are attacking in response to what's happening in Gaza. And the US then attacking the Houthis is escalating things further. From the Houthis' perspective, if you stop what's happening in Gaza, everything de-escalates. And so you have a situation of violence begets violence. And we've been saying, stop it all. Everybody stop the violence. Stop the violence from Hamas. It's horrific. And end the violence against all civilians. Stop bombing Gaza. And that is not just a naive perspective. That's actually a very pragmatic way forward. Ending the war on Gaza is one of the most critical steps moving forward. The other thing that is deeply disconcerting is that we're hearing binary views on international politics about the way this is being discussed. There are language of good versus unilaterally evil. The language that's being used is the axis of chaos, terror, and instability. Iran, Russia, Syria, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and the militias in Iraq. So the axis of chaos, terror, and instability versus the axis of order led by the US, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, the UAE, and Qatar, and a revitalized Palestinian Authority. Now, please, I am not supporting any of the groups in the chaos side, nor am I'm not trying to stand on anyone's side, but this false bifurcation that any one country is all good. The US has plenty of complicity and horror. Israel has plenty to be responsible for, as does Hezbollah and Hamas and all these other groups. But this idea of good versus evil is not going to help anyone. And so part of the US's effort to consolidate this axis, they're saying that a modified US, Saudi, Israel, Palestine deal is going to bring peace. And this kind of good versus evil paradigm is only going to cause more chaos. I could give you more detailed updates. I just wanted to say there also were two major attacks in Israel. One was a 79-year-old Israeli woman was killed. 17 people were wounded in this ramming and stabbing attack in 3 different locations in the Israeli city of Ra'anah. 2 people, a 16-year-old boy, were in serious condition. 15 people, including 6 children, were hurt or moderately hurt. This was one of the most significant, if not the most significant attack within Israel since October 7th. And then there was another attack. A 44-year-old Palestinian from Hebron entered Israel and was arrested because he rammed civilians with 3 different vehicles. I don't quite understand that story. I've not read the details yet, but that's the summary headline. And so that was kind of a second sign of escalations and attacks against Israelis. And then you, of course, have now in Gaza more than 24,000 people killed, more than 60,000 people injured. Australia's foreign minister is coming now to Israel and on a Middle East tour, and he is saying the only solution is a sustainable ceasefire. And our hope and our call and our prayer to God is that Biden will change his mind and his heart, and that he also will call for a sustainable ceasefire and alternatives, to violence and escalations and war. Security officials have said the West Bank is on the verge of explosion. And if we see that, we could even see escalations within Israel. 20% of Israel citizens are Palestinian citizens of Israel. And so that is another line in all of this. So as escalations increase, my final word is that we must hold on to hope for a different reality and a better future. These are just a few of the words I shared Sunday in a service that we did of lament and a call to action from Dominus Flavit on the Mount of Olives. We're just editing that now. It'll be on our website. Hope is not just an idealistic dream or a far and distant reality. We must do everything within our power to make our hope for peace a reality, using our resources to influence world powers, elected officials, religious leaders, diplomats, everyone in our orbit. This affects all of us. Peace is the only answer that will bring safety and security for Jews and lasting liberation and justice for Palestinians. Hope is not passive. Hope demands that we take action. We have a critical role to play. Hope is not giving in to despair, but moving forward anyway. Even when we don't know whether or not our actions are making a difference, we take a step forward each and every day. Step by step, we keep taking steps forward in solidarity. I hope you'll listen to the whole service as a call to action and solidarity as together we pursue peace.